All right, hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. And we are going to go over all of the poetry that I read in 2022, and we're going to rank them from my least favorite poetry collection to my most favorite poetry collection that I read in 2022. Now, these aren't necessarily ones that came out in 2022. A lot of them did though. I would say at least half of them did come out in 2022, and then the other half are from whenever. So we technically have 10 books to talk about here today, but one is an honorable mention that we're going to go over first, because while there is poetry in it, I would say that that is not the main form that is involved in that piece of work. So I'll just have that caveat up front. And we will go ahead and dive into it. So the honorable mention that I want to bring up really quickly off the bat is The Fire This Time. This is an anthology collection edited by Jesmyn Ward. Now there is poetry in this, but there are only a few pieces of poetry. The main form of writing in here are essays. So like, you know, this would be more of an essay collection than a poetry collection. I think there are 3 poems included in this, and they are all great, but I just didn't want to put this somewhere else because it is mainly essays. So the poetry in here is phenomenal. I very much enjoyed it. It opens with a poem by Jericho Brown from The Tradition. It is the titular poem, The Tradition, and there are a few others. But yeah, that has poetry in it. So I read it in 2022. There's poetry, but you know, it's mostly essays. So still highly recommend this if you're interested. All right, so now we're getting into the, I don't know, actual poetry. The bottom one of this list is experimental, let's say, and it is also my least favorite. I think you could also classify this as a novel, but it is classified as poetry because it is kind of written in stream of consciousness / verse, and that is Dead Souls by Sam Riviere. This is by Catapult. It was in my Catapult Publisher Taste Test video, and if you saw that video, you know I did not like this. I did not like this at all. I will be unhauling this. I'm not going to keep it. So everything is just, you know, blocks of language. You know, there's no page breaks, there's very little punctuation. It's all just kind of one long form poem, so to speak. So even on the back, it does classify this as poetry, but yeah, do with that what you will. I didn't very much enjoy this. It follows an unnamed narrator who lives in a futuristic society where, in order to deal with plagiarism or any type of redundant thought or work, they come up with this software that, you know, assesses and gives a score for whether or not they've seen those ideas, themes, anything like that already talked about in previous published work. And they find themselves in a bar with an author who, well, technically a poet, who was deemed to have, you know, plagiaristic score on a work that he submitted and had a fall from grace. So you're getting that poet's life story basically since then. I didn't enjoy this. I think that this just was, for me, mostly dull, and while I do think it's trying to be a takedown of the publishing world in general, I just left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't like the way that it was being done. And like, while I agree publishing needs to change, there were some things in here where I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. So yeah, I don't know. Not a lot to say about this. I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't for me. It also felt very, I don't know, kind of rooted in internalized misogyny for me. But yeah, that is Dead Souls. Okay, so now as we move through the rest of this list, these are going to look like more traditional poetry collections. So the next one on my list is one that I read recently. It was in my December wrap-up video, and that is The Nightgown and Other Poems. This is a collection by Taisia, Kitaskaia, and this is published by Deep Vellum. Now, this is a collection of retold fairy tales that have some kind of like dark, bizarre elements to them. And ultimately this didn't work for me either. This was bordering a little bit on the too absurd for me, and I just couldn't follow what was going on. A few of the poems I did enjoy, but I disliked more than I liked. So overall, this didn't really work for me. But if you like super experimental, bizarre stuff, this might be a good fit for you. I do love the cover, so sad that I didn't love this collection. But yeah, that is the Nightgown. Next up, we have a very kind of slender collection, and that is The Trees Witness Everything. This is a collection by Victoria Chang, and this is published by Copper Canyon Press, which is a lovely small press that is actually in Washington, the state that I live. And this one also didn't totally jive with me. So this is a collection of wakas, which are poems that follow some sort of like pattern or count, and sometimes they're mirroring. That can look like different things, but they're also tend to be pretty short. So if I like flip open to a random page, there's 4 on those pages alone. So some of them are multiple pages, but most of them look like this. This one is, I think this one was affected a little bit by how short the poems are. I just couldn't feel like I got fully invested in a lot of them, and like wasn't gathering a lot of meaning for myself personally. So this is supposed to be kind of following themes of mirroring in general. So like shadow and light, or light and dark. And there is like a melancholic vibe going on in here. But yeah, for me, I couldn't really pull the themes across all of the writing, and I think that did have to do with the length. So this one I didn't love, but if you like really like short, sharp poetry that doesn't necessarily need a theme to collect all of it together, can just kind of be like piecey and you go to one by one, then you might enjoy this. So that is The Trees Witness Everything. Next up, we have what would be classified as nonfiction poetry. And this is again kind of bordering on, is it poetry? Is it vignettes? Who really knows? But that is Bluets by Maggie Nelson. So this is all about her relationship with the color blue. And I could say like her love affair with the color blue. And she's flipping back through all these memories and reflections on what the color blue has meant to her throughout her life. So this is a little bit of what it looks like. All of the little vignettes or poems are numbered. And yeah, I think that this was a collection that some of them I loved and adored and really had me pondering them for a long time. And then other ones, it was the situation where, I think I said this before in my nonfiction, that I was like, okay, but like anyone could have written that. I know that sounds bad, but some of them were just like, so I don't know, it just didn't seem like anything super special on the page, while others were great. So this just suffered from inconsistency for me on how I was feeling from like vignette to vignette or poem to poem. So yeah, that is Bluets by Maggie Nelson. And this one was published by whom? Who did this? Oh, this one is published by Wave Books. And I do adore this publication, that everything is just different shades of blue except for that white box. So yeah, beautiful production. All right, now I would say we're getting into my top 5, and these I would recommend pretty widely. I'll try and give specifics on who I think might want to pick these up, just as I kind of did with the ones before, to see if, you know, it might be a good pick for you if you're trying to get into some poetry. So the next one up is Goldenrod, and this is by Maggie Smith, who is a very popular poet. And this is published by, let's see, this is published by One Signal Publishers, which is also Atria. And I will say, when I first reviewed this book, I was like, oh yeah, this is such a beautiful cover. And like, I don't know what these are on the cover, but I love them. I'll give you one guess as to what they are. Yeah, you're right. They're goldenrods. So I don't know why I would not recognize that they are goldenrods, hence the title of the cover, but you know, anyway, we're just gonna forget I did that. So this one I did overall enjoy. Again, this suffered a little bit from me not loving every poem in here, but this is pretty slice of life. So the overarching theme of this collection is the beauty and the messiness of life. And there's very much that like flipping back and forth on, you know, joy and sorrow and all these types of ranges of the human experience. So I did enjoy it for that reason. This had one of my favorite poems of the year in it. It had like a beautiful reflection on what it's like to have a partner in life that gets to experience your own life through a different lens and has all these memories of you that you yourself might not even have anymore. And like the beauty and like reverence of that, which I just love. That touched me so deeply, and I've thought of that multiple times since. There's definitely some great stuff going on here. I think this is good for people who have maybe read a few collections and are looking for a new person to go to that really like slice of life, kind of lit fic girlies type of situation. And no shade on that. I am included in that demographic. So I do think this is still great for someone who's like semi-new to poetry and is looking for some good, you know, beauty in everyday life type of stuff. So that is Goldenrod by Maggie Smith. Next one up is Machete, and this is by Tomas Q. Morin. And this cover I adore. It's so fantastic. This one is published by Knopf. And this follows what I would say is the cruelty of life, right? If the last one showed some of the beauty of everyday life, this shows some of the cruelty of it. This does have poems about the pandemic in it, so I will just throw that out there if you're may or may not be ready to read that. And the pandemic poems are actually my favorite ones in this collection. I think it so well encapsulated what that experience was like for a lot of people across the globe, and kind of that like cumulative experience that a lot of us had. This also has some takedowns of the 21st century and a lot of ways that our current society, particularly American society, is really not healthy for us. So those are some of the overarching themes going on here. So if you like some sort of like gritty type of poetry, this might be a good thing for you to pick up. The writing is stunning, and yeah, I think there's a lot to get out of these poems. So highly recommend this one. Next one was a gift from my friend Kat, and that is Welcome to Midland. This is by Logen, and this is published by Deep Vellum. This one is also classified as nonfiction. The other two that I'll be talking about shortly are as well. And this follows Logen's life, and it has a lot to do with sexuality, and it also has to do with what it's like to be in an abusive relationship. So trigger warnings going in. This also struggles and grapples with some of the politics going on in Texas, because that is where they are from. So this one I do think is maybe one of the more straightforward collections on this list. So it is a really good place to start with poetry if you're brand new to it and looking for something that you don't really have to like parse through to try and figure out what the meaning is or anything like that. This one's pretty straightforward and accessible and understandable. So I very much enjoyed this. If you like those themes and you're looking for some type of like good entry point to poetry, I would highly recommend this one. Next up is the collection that had my favorite poem of the year. The Maggie Nelson one was probably my second favorite. This one had my favorite poem of the year, and that is Philomath. And this is by Devon Walker Figueroa, and this is published by Milkweed Editions, and Milkweed Editions has a collection every year of a poet who wins a prize, and they get, as a result, a collection published by Milkweed Editions. This is funded through the National Poetry Series, and this was the one that got published in 2021. This is also classified as nonfiction, and it is about the poet's life. And this also has some abuse in it, kind of content warnings for sexual assault, so know that going in. It has a lot to do with America in general, and this has some portions that take place in the Midwest. It also has some portions that take place on the coast, the Oregon coast. And yeah, it's just a really sometimes beautiful, sometimes dark, but very, I hate to use the word raw, but I'm going to use it here, depiction of what life in America can be like, particularly for a woman. So yeah, I loved this collection. I thought it was so great. My favorite poem of all year is Philomath, the titular poem, and it's the very first poem in the collection. I just adore it. It's so fantastic, and I would highly, highly recommend it. This is another one where I think if you're ready to kind of be a little lost in the sauce, maybe a bit, but just have some really beautiful language enveloping you, and you're willing to kind of either just flow with that or try and do some discovery of like, oh, I wonder what they're trying to do here with this kind of page layout or word selection or cadence, then this is a really great one. This also has a beautiful textured cover, and I just love this kind of like wood grain tree ring that's going on here. I just love it. I think it's a beautiful collection all around, and that is Philomath. Now, my favorite poetry collection of the year is I Hope This Finds You Well by Kate Baer. This is published by Harper Perennial, which is an imprint of HaperCollins, so I will link information about the strike down below for you to check out. Some of the other books here were as well. And this was so fantastic. So these are erasure poems, which involve taking an already like set piece of like media and then erasing some of the words out of them to create something new. What Kate Baer does with this collection is she collects a bunch of posts and comments on her social media that most of the time are very hateful, and she uses the erasure aspect to sort of bring to light the true hate that is in that comment, that people are sort of like dressing up to try to make them feel like it's not something really hurtful and sexist and racist and whatever else they might be saying. And I thought that was done so brilliantly to just, if we strip all this away, this is really just hate speech. That's what it is. And yeah, it was just so moving and brilliant to see the words that she would decide to take out. And you get to see the original next to the erasure poem that they have created. So for example, here we sort of have the original post, and then we have the erasure poem over here. So lots of feminist themes going on here, lots of dark side of social media. And yeah, I think there's also some level of empowerment going on here, and it feels like a very like empowered sense of like changing and shining a light on this horrific kind of undertone that she's experiencing online. I think this is a great starting point again for someone who's just getting into poetry. I think it's really helpful to be able to see the original piece and then see the poem, and that way you can kind of like study the changes and make whatever meaning you will out of that. So if you're looking for a place to get into with poetry, I again highly recommend this collection. That is I Hope This Finds You Well by Kate Baer. I highly recommend all of Kate Baer's work if you're just getting into poetry, but this is an even more fantastic place to start. So that is my ranking of my 2022 poetry. I hope you all enjoyed and found something that you might be interested in reading. If you had some great poetry you read in 2022, please let me know. Or even if you have some stuff that you're wanting to read for 2023, I really am always looking to add more poetry to the mix. And we are coming up on National Poetry Month in March. So I need some new things to buy because I always do a big poetry haul in March. With that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.